So, you want to retire. You want to still be able to pay your bills, but not have to work. But not at 60 or even 75 like a lot of the headlines say nowadays. And to like bid your fears at rest, I don't have some MLM or crypto scam or anything else like that to show you. I have nothing to sell to you. Anyways, if you're looking to retire early the real way, well, you've come to the right place. Myself and my partner are planning to be able to do this in around 10 years or so. And frankly, it's a lot more simple than you think. If you're not familiar with the FIRE movement, it's a group of people who work harder than most to be able to save and invest much harder than most. They forego extravagances and find ways to increase their income to the point where they are saving and investing significantly more than most. And I'm in the infancy of doing this myself. However, despite how good margaritas on a beach sounds, I'm going to tell you why it's probably not for most people and probably not a good thing for even those that are pursuing it. And then I'm going to proceed to tell you why you should do it anyway, which is kind of paradoxical, but you'll have to stick with me for the rest of the video to find out what I mean by that. But before all that, I'm Nick Coulter. I'm a business design student who also works full-time, and this is my channel where I've discussed various financial topics. I'm trying to do it in greater depth than the average blogger, and I'm focusing on Australian finance. Welcome. Hit the like button if you're into that sort of thing. So as I was saying, there's two core ideas at play when we talk about people who want to retire early. Number one, and this is probably the most important one, a belief in capital markets and market efficiency as well. Now, I've piled those into one point because I'm going to explain them later, but they kind of are two separate points ready for another video. And number two, a belief in saving more and being more frugal to invest more. But I'm going to break those ideas down later. Put simply, they believe in capitalism, and more specifically, the belief in capital markets being efficient. Now, the efficient market hypothesis has been around for a while, but has been adopted by these FIRE bloggers. And to be fair, it's a really good hypothesis. It suggests that capital markets are as close to efficient as possible, meaning that prices of things like stocks are always up to date and always reflect all the information available at any one time. And they update almost instantly to any new information available. But the best read for the layman is A Random Walk Down Wall Street. It's probably the book that managed to popularize the belief in capital markets and the rise of index funds in the 90s and into the 2000s. To cut a long story short, active management, the art of picking stocks or industries that are supposed to perform better than any one capital market itself, is a loser's game. It's inefficient and it's largely based on luck. As more and more skilled managers enter the active managed business, luck becomes an increasingly high determinant of success. Success being beating market beta. So, index funds provide exposure to a whole of capital markets and the thousands of companies within them within a fraction of a cost of what a team of stock pickers or managers or banks could provide. Picking the winners is a loser's game, as funny as that sounds. Owning a diversified pool of stocks or owning the winners and the losers is a winner's game. It's good for you, good for the companies, and good for capital markets as a whole, which benefits all of society. Great, so let's buy an index fund, hey? That crippling debt crisis that we're in. Oh, that's no good. That's where the frugality side of things comes in. If you have a high interest rate student loan or something like a car loan, above interest rates of about 5% is usually the guideline. You should pay that off first before doing any investing. And frugality plays a massive role in that. FIRE hopefuls will sometimes mess around with debt, but it's only for the sake of investing their money elsewhere to get a low interest rate loan to be able to see the opportunity cost of that money not being invested. They take living below your means to the next level. Many FIRE hopefuls are above a 50% savings rate, meaning they spend less than half of their income. And this is literally the first step to FIRE, is cutting back on expenses to then invest more after paying off any high interest rate debt that you might have. I love this aspect of the FIRE community. Minimalism, as much as it's a buzzword now, has really played a big role in finding out what's important in my life, as well as countless others. It's played a huge role in providing me with better financial and daily habits in general. Psychological ideas like the hedonic treadmill, more on that later, compound interest, and priorities should play a massive role in determining any financial goal that you might have, or any life goal in general. So basically what it comes down to, if you want to retire early, you have to save and invest way more than average. There's really no ifs or buts about it. That's why folks in the f.i.r.e community are radical about throwing huge chunks of money towards any high interest rate debt and huge chunks of money towards their investment portfolios. This is all outside of super contributions, of course, because those can't be accessed till preservation age. For most of us, that'd be at around 60, based on the demographic that has been watching my channel recently. So that sort of stuff isn't really constituted as an early retirement. And when I say saving much more than they make, I mean it literally. Folks in the f.i.r.e community can go as high as 70 to 80% savings rates, depending on their income. I myself target a 65% savings rate. That's between me and my partner. And maybe that sounds like way too much for you right now, which is fair enough. Most people are only saving about 3 to 5% of their income in Australia. But at the end of the day, you have to start somewhere. The key is getting into a regular habit of saving small chunks and letting compound interest do the rest of the work for you, rather than against you on high interest rate debt. And this part of the f.i.r.e movement is the most important part, frugality. Once you understand how index funds work, they're pretty plug and play. You just set an amount that you want to put in every month, or whatever other interval you might want to do it at. Once you reach that goal, you buy the index fund, and voila. You just have to decide where your asset allocation is going to go. So if you want global stocks, just US stocks, Australian stocks, there's index funds for all those types. And you just have to continually buy until the income from those investments outlasts your regular income and how much you spend. The long and short is, assuming you're investing in index funds, aka investing your funds wisely, and perhaps with a 5-factor tilt, more on that in a video soon, you can expect to retire in these amount of times if you're saving at this rate. Now, this is under the assumption of what's called the 4% rule, something you've surely come across if you've done any research into retirement planning online. The 4% rule suggests that you can spend 4% of your assets every year while adjusting for inflation each year going forward. If you can stay under that 4% threshold, you can maintain your current state of lifestyle indefinitely. Or at least that's what the financial bloggers say. Actually, the 4% rule is based on a 30-year retirement window. You see, complex problems can never usually be solved by an idiom or rule of thumb. And even if the 4% rule was valid, which it really isn't for this use case, it would be wildly inefficient. In times of great prosperity, you'd have wild excesses of funds, and in bear markets, you would be running out of funds very quickly. And the 4% rule isn't valid because it was based on 30-year time horizons. Not too many early retirees would be considered early retirees if they had 30 years of retirement left. Many early retirees face as long as 60-year time horizons. And this is also based on historical US stock and bond data. For one, disclaimer, historical returns do not equal future returns. We shouldn't really have to explain that in a financial topic video. And even US historical returns are not indicative of that of global historical stock and bond returns. Global historical returns have trailed the US by some margin over the past 100 years. And in a revisit of the 4% rule, it was shown that only Canada would be able to sustain a 4% rule for the same period when assessing 20 top countries. Ben Felix from Common Sense Investing broke down an actual early retiree's safe savings rate in his video on the 4% rule. He found out to the 95th percentile that a 2.5% withdrawal rate was much more sustainable over a 60-year time horizon. He factored in the rule with global stocks and using Monte Carlo simulations. Can explain that more in another video if you like. And factored in the high valuations of current stocks globally relative to the past, and found out that a 2.5% withdrawal rate was more sustainable for an early retiree. This is dramatically less than the conveniently touted 4% rule by early retirement bloggers. This means that a retiree with a similar stock and bond portfolio would need $1.6 million invested to receive a $40,000 a year income in Australia. That's minimum wage. However, the negatives of the FIRE movement don't end there. The reality is that the FIRE movement suffers from a few glaringly bright omissions in the form of psychological shortfalls. Retiring early should never be a goal, in my opinion, for any human. Well, one that's not facing some sort of disability of sorts. Because the reality is, work is great for humans. Humans need work. Like seriously, rates of depression of older retirees immediately after they retire skyrocket. Check out this study here. And the very concept used by early retirement bloggers to sell the frugality aspect of FIRE, the hedonic treadmill, can also invalidate any utility of an early retirement. How ironic. Hedonic adaptation states that humans have a cyclic adjustment to change. We get something new in our lives, a new car, shoes, whatever it might be, and receive a short-term dopamine rush. However, we quickly return to our baseline levels of happiness. I'm sure you've experienced this on a micro level when you buy that new toy, that new thing, that new car. It brings you so much joy initially, but eventually when the new car smell wears off, at the end of the day, all it does is take you from A to B like your last car did anyway. It doesn't bring you much more happiness anymore, and you simply just lose appreciation for it. Financial bloggers bombard people with this message, and that's a great thing because it is a great message. However, for some convenient reason, I wonder why, they forget to apply this to an early retiree. Put it in this perspective, you sacrifice lots, you work long hours, you don't buy a thing for 10 years, and whoa, you early retire. That's awesome. All your friends are congratulating you, you get to stick it to that boss you hate, you get hit with a dopamine rush, you run out of your job, smiling, it's almost like you've hit the lottery. And then weeks go by. Nothing really changes in your life. And you start to not appreciate it as much. Just like when you bought that new car. You begin to miss interactions with your co-workers. You long for purpose during your day. And you wish for the mental stimulation and reward that your job brought you. And now you just sit wondering where to spend all your time, given that your friends are always at work when you used to be at work. Oops. Back to that baseline happiness, I guess. You see what I mean? The best study I found on this was from 1978. A trio of researchers at the Northwestern University and the University of Massachusetts attempted to answer whether or not happiness is relative by asking two very disparate groups about the happiness in their lives. Recent winners of the Illinois State Lottery, whose prizes range from $50,000 to $1 million, and recent victims of catastrophic accidents who were now paraplegic or quadriplegic. In interviews with the experimenters, the two groups were asked, among other things, to rate the amount of pleasure they got from everyday activities. Small but enjoyable things like chatting with a friend, watching TV, eating breakfast, laughing at a joke, or receiving a compliment. When the researchers analysed their results, they found that the recent accident victims reported gaining more happiness from these everyday pleasures than the lottery winners. I wanted to put this into my own words, but frankly the authors summarised it so well that I couldn't not quote their summary. This is how the original authors summarised it. Eventually, the thrill of winning the lottery will wear itself off. If all things are judged by the extent to which they depart from a baseline of past experience, gradually, even the most positive events will cease to have impact as they themselves are absorbed into a new baseline against which further events are judged. Thus, as lottery winners became accustomed to the additional pleasures made possible by their new wealth, these pleasures should be experienced as less intense and should no longer contribute very much to their general level of happiness. But maybe the most important thing this research has to suggest is just how awful people are at predicting what will make them happy. Something psychologists call effective forecasting. This is perhaps particularly true when it comes to money. A shorter commute would make you as happy as a 40% pay raise. Getting a vacation from your boss would make you happier than receiving cash. And having more free time would make you happier than having more money. And yet, people always think more money is the answer. Despite this, there is plenty of good in the FIRE movement. An emphasis on saving over consumption, investing regularly and early, and emphasizing the importance of time cost are all things we sometimes fail to recognize the importance of. These are things FIRE hopefuls are great at, and the reason why I'm currently following the FIRE formula. However, fantasizing about not working is so naive. The goal of a human with money is to use that money to provide its greatest utility towards happiness. The goal of the human investor is not actually to receive the highest return possible or to build the biggest portfolio possible, contrary to popular belief. It is to invest, save, and spend in the way that brings the most happiness to oneself. And the utility of putting money towards retiring early for people is unclear at best, and at worst will probably degrade your happiness. But that doesn't mean the FI or financial independence part of FIRE isn't important. This is a goal that everyone should work towards, in my opinion. And the principles that FIRE is based on, saving more, investing more and earlier, budgeting, and being frugal with money, believing in capital markets and the efficiency of those capital markets, are all things we should strive towards. The TLDR of this video is that humans are really bad at understanding what brings them happiness, and they are even worse at setting goals that make them happy. And if we agree that happiness is the goal of any human or human investor, money should only serve as a vehicle to pursue that goal. The FIRE movement really strongly understands the utility of applying psychological factors to financial goals. And they realize that buying more shit isn't a path to happiness. I entirely agree with this. However, they fail to apply that thinking to the early retirement side of the equation. An early retirement won't make you happy just as a new car won't. Neither of these things are generally good uses of money towards happiness. However, financial independence does allow a person to have the freedom to pursue work that is meaningful to them, and also give back to their community and those around you. But financial independence isn't a requirement for this. Why wait? Seriously. If your job is that bad that you have to retire to get away from it as soon as possible, quit sooner rather than later. Focus on meaningful work that pays okay, rather than high-paying work that lets you retire earlier. And then you likely won't want to retire. But once you've reached that goal, you should then focus on using the principles that FIRE teaches so well to build slow but sure financial independence over time. Because financial independence is important, but retiring early isn't. In fact, the evidence shows you'd probably just be lonely and bored.